The tears fell freely down her face as Bethany Winters collapsed onto the church steps, her white wedding dress now stained with dirt and tears. The man she had trusted with her heart had left her standing alone at the altar, humiliated before the entire town of Silver Creek. The year was 1876, and at 22 years of age, Bethany had just experienced what felt like the end of her world. "You'll never cry alone again," a deep voice declared, causing Bethany to look up through her tear-filled eyes. Standing before her was Garrett Hayes, tall and imposing in his dusty trail clothes, his cowboy hat tipped back to reveal concerned green eyes. At 26, Garrett was known throughout the territory as a skilled horseman and ranch hand who had recently returned to Silver Creek after years away. "Mr. Hayes," Bethany said, hastily wiping her tears away, embarrassed to be seen in such a state. "I'm sorry, I'm not fit for company right now." "No need to apologize, Miss Winters," Garrett replied, offering her his handkerchief. "I couldn't help but notice your distress. It seems that fool Thompson didn't deserve you after all." Bethany accepted the handkerchief with trembling fingers. "The entire town is probably laughing at me now. Left at the altar like some unwanted parcel." Garrett shook his head, his expression hardening. "Anyone laughing at your pain is no better than Thompson. May I sit?" When she nodded, he settled beside her on the church steps, keeping a respectful distance. The spring sun beat down on them, but the church's shadow provided some relief from the heat. "I remember you," Bethany said after a moment. "You left town before I finished school. Your father's ranch went under after the drought of '68, Garrett finished. "I've been working my way through the territories since then. Just came back to Silver Creek last week. Just in time to witness my humiliation," Bethany said bitterly. "Just in time to offer a shoulder if you need one," Garrett corrected gently. For the first time that day, Bethany managed a small smile. "You're kind, Mr. Hayes." "Garrett, please." "Garrett," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. They sat in companionable silence as the church bell rang 3 times. Bethany realized she should have been married for an hour by now, celebrating with friends and family at the reception her mother had spent months planning. "I should go home," she said, rising unsteadily to her feet. Her legs felt weak, as though they might give out beneath her. "Allow me to escort you," Garrett offered, standing and extending his arm. Bethany hesitated. "People will talk. People always talk. But I reckon you could use a friend right now." "Friend." The word was simple but comforting. Bethany took his arm, feeling an unexpected warmth spread through her at the contact. "Thank you," she said quietly as they began walking down the dusty main street. Garrett tipped his hat to her. "Like I said, Miss Winters, you'll never cry alone again, if I can help it." Little did either of them know how true those words would prove to be. The walk to the Winters' home on the edge of town took them past curious onlookers and whispered conversations that fell silent as they approached. Bethany kept her head high, drawing strength from Garrett's steady presence beside her. When they reached the white picket fence surrounding her family's modest home, Bethany paused. Would you like to come in? I'm sure my parents would want to thank you for your kindness." Before Garrett could answer, the front door burst open, and Bethany's mother rushed out, her face etched with worry. "Bethany." "Oh, my darling girl." Mrs. Winters embraced her daughter tightly. "When you ran from the church, we were so concerned." "I'm sorry, Mother," Bethany murmured. "I couldn't face everyone." Mrs. Winters noticed Garrett then, her expression shifting from relief to curiosity. "Mr. Hayes, isn't it? Thomas Hayes's boy." "Yes, madam," Garrett replied, removing his hat respectfully. "I found your daughter at the church and offered to see her home safely." "That was very gentlemanly of you," Mrs. Winters said, her voice warm with gratitude. "Please come inside. The least we can offer is some refreshment." Inside the Winters' home, Bethany's father paced the parlor, his face thunderous with rage. If I ever see that Thompson boy again, I'll— Father, Bethany interrupted, please. I just want to forget today happened. Mr. Winters softened at the sight of his daughter. My girl, he said, embracing her. I'm so sorry. As the family settled in the parlor, with Mrs. Winters bringing tea and cookies, Garrett felt increasingly out of place among their private grief and relief. He finished his tea quickly and rose to leave. I should be on my way. The Millers are expecting me back at their ranch before sundown. You're working for the Millers? Mr. Winters asked, seemingly grateful for the change of subject. Yes, sir. Helping with their spring roundup and then staying on as foreman if all goes well. Bethany looked up at this news. The Miller Ranch is just a few miles from here. It is, Garrett confirmed, his eyes meeting hers briefly. Miss Winters, I hope you recover quickly from today's events. Thank you again, Mr. Hayes. Garrett, she corrected herself. Your kindness meant more than you know. As Garrett rode back to the Miller Ranch that evening, his thoughts kept returning to Bethany Winters. Her tear-stained face, the quiet dignity she'd shown walking through town, the small smile she'd given him as he left, these images stayed with him as he guided his horse along the dusty trail. The following weeks brought a routine to Garrett's life that he found satisfying. The work at the Miller Ranch was hard but rewarding, and he quickly earned the respect of the other hands with his skilled horsemanship and fair approach to the daily challenges of ranch life. It was a month after the incident at the church when Garrett rode into town for supplies. As he was loading sacks of flour onto his wagon, he spotted Bethany emerging from the general store. She looked different. Her honey blonde hair was pulled back simply, and she wore a practical blue dress that complemented her eyes. But what struck him most was the absence of the defeated slump to her shoulders that he'd witnessed on the church steps. Miss Winters, he called, tipping his hat. Bethany turned, surprise giving way to a warm smile when she recognized him. Mr. Hayes, it's good to see you.
And you.
You're looking well. A faint blush colored her cheeks. I'm feeling better, thank you. An awkward silence fell between them, broken only when Garrett cleared his throat. I was about to get some lunch at the diner. Would you care to join me? The invitation surprised them both, but Bethany nodded. I'd like that. At the diner, over plates of chicken and dumplings, they talked easily. Garrett spoke of his years traveling through the territories, working on different ranches, and learning the varied ways of cattle ranching. Bethany shared stories of teaching at the local school and her dreams of someday opening a proper bookshop in Silver Creek. There's not much call for books here, Garrett observed. Perhaps not yet, Bethany agreed. But the town is growing. The railroad will reach us next year. More families will come, and with them, more children who need to learn. Her passion was evident in her voice, and Garrett found himself captivated by her vision. This was a different woman from the one he'd found crying on the church steps. This Bethany Winters was full of life and purpose. What about you? She asked. Will you stay at the Miller Ranch? Garrett considered the question. I've been thinking about buying some land of my own. There's a small parcel north of town that might be available soon. That sounds wonderful, Bethany said sincerely. You'd be your own man then. That's the dream, Garrett agreed. But it takes more than dreams to build a life. As they finished their meal and stepped back onto the boardwalk, Garrett found himself reluctant to part ways. May I call on you sometime, Miss Winters? Bethany hesitated, and Garrett immediately regretted his boldness. Of course, she wouldn't want to court so soon after being jilted. I understand if it's too soon, he began.
No, Bethany interrupted.
I'd like that very much. Sunday afternoon, perhaps? After church. Garrett couldn't help the grin that spread across his face. Sunday it is. Over the following months, their courtship progressed with a gentle steadiness that both found comforting. Garrett called on Bethany every Sunday, sometimes taking her for drives in the countryside, other times simply sitting on her parents' porch, talking until the sun set. They learned each other's stories, how Garrett had lost his mother to influenza when he was just 10, how Bethany had always felt different from the other girls in town with her love of books and learning. They shared their hopes for the future and found, to their mutual delight, that those futures seemed increasingly to include each other. By late summer, the town's gossip about Bethany's failed wedding had largely been replaced by speculation about when Garrett Hayes might propose. But both Bethany and Garrett were content to let their relationship develop at its own pace, savoring each moment together. It was during one of their Sunday afternoon drives that Garrett finally showed Bethany the land he hoped to purchase. "It's not much to look at now," he admitted as they stood on a hill overlooking the 10 acres of grassland bordered by a small creek. "But the soil's good, and there's water year-round." Bethany turned in a slow circle, taking in the rolling hills, the distant mountains, and the clear blue sky above. "It's beautiful, Garrett." "You think so?" There was a vulnerability in his voice that she'd rarely heard.
Ido.
"I can see why you love it." She walked a few paces, then turned back to him with a smile. "Where would you build a house?" Garrett pointed to a flat area near a cluster of cottonwood trees. "Right there. Morning sun, afternoon shade. Protected from the north wind in winter." "And a garden here?" Bethany suggested, indicating a sunny patch nearby. "If the lady of the house wanted a garden, that would be the perfect spot," Garrett agreed, his eyes fixed on Bethany's face. She met his gaze, understanding the unspoken question in his words. "The lady of the house would definitely want a garden," she said softly. Garrett took her hands in his. "Bethany, I know it hasn't been that long since you found me crying on those church steps," she finished for him, "and told me I'd never cry alone again." "I meant it," Garrett said earnestly. "I want to be the one who's always there to dry your tears, though I hope to give you far more reasons to smile than to cry." Bethany's heart swelled with emotion. "Are you asking me something, Garrett Hayes?" "I reckon I am," he said, dropping to one knee before her. "Bethany Winters, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears filled Bethany's eyes, but they were tears of joy this time. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." Their engagement announcement caused a stir in Silver Creek, but most reactions were positive. Bethany's parents, having grown fond of Garrett during his many visits, gave their blessing readily. Even Mrs. Miller, Garrett's employer, expressed her happiness for the couple, though she lamented losing her best foreman. "We'll need to save for a while before we can build on the land," Garrett told Bethany one evening as they sat on her parents' porch swing. "I've put aside some money, but a proper house will take more." "I have some savings too," Bethany reminded him. "And I can continue teaching after we're married." Garrett looked surprised. "You'd want to keep teaching?" "If that's all right with you," Bethany said, suddenly uncertain. "I love the children, and the extra money would help us build our home faster." Garrett considered this, then nodded. "I think it's a fine idea." "You're a natural teacher, Bethany. I wouldn't want to take that away from you." Her heart warmed at his understanding. So many men would have insisted their wives give up working, but Garrett seemed to genuinely respect her passion for education. Their wedding was set for October, when the fall colors would be at their peak and the harvest completed. Unlike her previous engagement, Bethany felt only excitement and certainty as the date approached. Garrett was everything William Thompson had not been: honest, hardworking, and completely devoted to her happiness. 2 weeks before the wedding, however, their plans were threatened by unexpected news. William Thompson had returned to Silver Creek. Bethany first heard about it from one of her students, whose innocent comment about Miss Winters' old beau being back in town sent a chill through her. By the time school ended that day, she was a bundle of nerves. Garrett was waiting for her outside the schoolhouse, as had become his custom on Fridays. One look at her face told him something was wrong. "What is it?" he asked, taking her hand. "William's back," Bethany said, her voice tight. "I don't know why or what he wants, but he's here." Garrett's expression darkened. Has he approached you? No, I haven't seen him. I just heard from the children. They walked in silence for a moment, Garrett's protective instincts warring with his desire not to appear jealous or controlling. I'm not worried about my feelings for him, Bethany said, reading his thoughts. Those died the moment he left me at the altar. But I am concerned about why he's returned now, just before our wedding. Whatever his reasons, they don't change anything between us, Garrett assured her, squeezing her hand. But their conversation was cut short by the appearance of William Thompson himself, stepping out of the saloon as they passed. Bethany, William called, his voice carrying down the street. I've been hoping to see you. Bethany froze, feeling Garrett tense beside her. William approached, looking much as he had 6 months ago, handsome in a polished way, with expensive clothes and a confident swagger that now struck Bethany as arrogant rather than charming. William, she acknowledged coolly. I'm surprised to see you back in Silver Creek. William's gaze flickered to Garrett, then back to Bethany. I came back for you, of course, to explain and make amends. Garrett's hand tightened around Bethany's, but he remained silent, allowing her to handle the situation. There's nothing to explain, Bethany said firmly. You made your choice clear when you humiliated me in front of the entire town. I was a fool, William insisted, taking a step closer. I panicked, Bethany, but I've realized my mistake. We can start fresh. No, we cannot, Bethany interrupted. I'm engaged to Garrett now. We're to be married in 2 weeks. William looked genuinely shocked, his gaze moving to Garrett with newfound hostility. Hayes, the ranch hand? Surely you're joking. Garrett finally spoke, his voice controlled but dangerous. I'd be careful about how you speak to my fiancé, Thompson. William's face flushed with anger. This is absurd. Bethany, you can't possibly prefer this. Cowboy to what we had. What we had was a lie, Bethany replied, finding strength in Garrett's steady presence. What Garrett and I have is real. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have wedding preparations to attend to. She moved to step around William, but he grabbed her arm. Wait, before William could say another word, Garrett had inserted himself between them, his hand closing around William's wrist with enough pressure to make the other man wince and release Bethany. Don't touch her, Garrett said quietly, his eyes hard. For a tense moment, it seemed William might escalate the confrontation, but something in Garrett's steady gaze made him reconsider. He stepped back, rubbing his wrist. This isn't over, William muttered, but the threat sounded hollow even to his own ears. Yes, it is, Bethany stated firmly. Goodbye, William. As they walked away, Bethany was trembling slightly, though whether from anger or residual fear, she wasn't sure. Garrett wrapped an arm around her shoulders, providing silent support. Are you all right? He asked when they were out of earshot. I'm fine, Bethany assured him. Better than fine, actually. Seeing him again. I realized how completely my feelings for him have vanished. There's nothing there anymore. Garrett looked relieved but concerned. Do you think he'll cause trouble? He might try, Bethany admitted. William never did like losing. Her prediction proved accurate. Over the next week, William made several attempts to speak with Bethany alone, sending notes to the school and even appearing at her parents' home one evening when Garrett wasn't there. Mr. Winters had firmly sent him away, but William's persistence was becoming worrisome. Matters came to a head at the town social this Saturday, before the wedding. The event, held in the community hall, was ostensibly a harvest celebration, but many of the attendees were also using it as an opportunity to congratulate Bethany and Garrett. William arrived midway through the evening, clearly having had a few drinks at the saloon first. He made straight for Bethany, who was talking with several of the town's ladies about wedding preparations. Dance with me? William demanded, interrupting the conversation. No, thank you, Bethany replied calmly, though her heart was racing. One dance, William insisted. For old time's sake. The lady said no, Garrett's voice came from behind him. He had been across the room speaking with Mr. Miller, but had noticed William's approach immediately. William turned, his expression darkening. "This is between Bethany and me, Hayes. Stay out of it." "Anything concerning my fiancé concerns me," Garrett replied evenly. The music had stopped, and a hush fell over the gathering as people became aware of the confrontation. Bethany felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "You stole her from me," William accused, his voice rising. "You left her crying on the church steps," Garrett countered, anger finally showing in his voice. "I was there to pick up the pieces you broke." William lunged forward suddenly, taking a wild swing at Garrett, who sidestepped easily. The momentum carried William stumbling past him, nearly falling before he caught himself on a nearby table. "That's enough, Thompson," Sheriff Morris intervened, stepping between the men. "I think you'd better leave." "This isn't over," William spat, glaring at Garrett. "You haven't heard the last from me." As the sheriff escorted William out, whispers erupted throughout the hall. Bethany felt mortified, certain that once again she was the center of town gossip. Garrett moved to her side immediately. "I'm sorry about that," he said quietly. "Are you all right?" "I just want to go home," Bethany whispered, fighting tears. Garrett nodded, quickly making their excuses to the hosts before leading Bethany outside. The cool night air was a relief after the stuffy hall, and Bethany took several deep breaths to calm herself. "He's ruining everything again," she said bitterly as they walked toward her home. "First my wedding to him, and now our wedding." "No," Garrett said firmly, stopping and turning to face her. "He only has the power to ruin things if we let him. This is our time, Bethany. Our happiness. I won't let him take that from us." Bethany looked up at Garrett, his face silvered by moonlight, and felt her resolve strengthen. "You're right. I won't let him spoil our joy either." Garrett smiled, drawing her close. "That's my girl." The next morning, Sheriff Morris arrived at the Winters home with troubling news. William Thompson had been making threats against Garrett at the saloon after being ejected from the social. "I locked him up to sober him up," the sheriff explained, "but he's been released this morning and still seems determined to cause trouble. I thought you should know." "Thank you, Sheriff," Mr. Winters said gravely. "We appreciate the warning." When Garrett arrived later that day, they informed him of the situation. He took the news calmly, though his eyes hardened. "I'll speak with him," Garrett decided. "Maybe without an audience, we can resolve this reasonably." "I don't think that's wise," Mr. Winters cautioned. "Thompson was quite drunk last night, but his threats seemed genuine." "All the more reason to address this directly," Garrett insisted. "I won't have him casting a shadow over our wedding day." Despite their concerns, Bethany and her parents couldn't dissuade Garrett from his plan. He left, promising to return for supper and to be careful in his dealings with William. The hours passed with excruciating slowness for Bethany. When Garrett hadn't returned by sundown, her worry transformed into fear. "Something's wrong," she told her father. "Garrett is never late." Mr. Winters agreed, his own concern evident. "I'll go into town and look for him." "I'm coming with you," Bethany insisted, already reaching for her shawl. They found no sign of Garrett in town, though several people reported seeing him and William riding out together earlier in the afternoon, heading north. "North," Bethany repeated, her heart sinking. "Toward Garrett's land?" Sheriff Morris organized a search party, and as the men gathered their horses and lanterns, Bethany insisted on joining them despite her parents' objections. "I can't just wait at home," she argued. "Not when Garrett might be in danger." Reluctantly, her father helped her onto his spare horse, and they set off with the search party toward Garrett's property. They heard the gunshot before they saw anything, a single crack that echoed across the darkened landscape. Bethany's blood ran cold, and she urged her horse forward, outpacing several of the men as they crested the hill overlooking Garrett's land. In the valley below, illuminated by the light of a small campfire, two figures struggled. Even from a distance, Bethany recognized Garrett's broad shoulders and William's distinctive coat. As the search party galloped closer, William broke free of the struggle, raising a pistol. "Garrett!" Bethany screamed in warning. Garrett dove to one side as William fired, the bullet going wide. Before William could take aim again, the sheriff and his deputies were upon them, disarming William and pulling him away from Garrett. Bethany dismounted before her horse had fully stopped, running to Garrett, who was rising slowly from the ground, one hand pressed to his side. "Are you hurt?" she demanded, her hands searching him for injuries. "Just a graze from earlier," Garrett assured her, though his grimace told her it was more than a minor wound. "He ambushed me when I came to talk to him. Said if he couldn't have you, neither could I." The sheriff's men were securing William, who continued to shout threats and obscenities. Sheriff Morris approached Garrett and Bethany, his expression grim. "He'll be facing serious charges this time," the sheriff said. "Attempted murder, for starters." As they helped Garrett onto a horse for the ride back to town, Bethany noticed something that made her heart clench. They were standing exactly where Garrett had said he wanted to build their home, the spot now marred by the struggle and violence. "Don't worry," Garrett said softly, reading her thoughts. "This land is still ours. One bad night won't change that." The town doctor treated Garrett's wound, a bullet graze along his ribs that, while painful, wasn't serious, and declared him fit to marry as planned, though he should take it easy for a few weeks. William Thompson was held in the town jail awaiting a circuit judge, his threats having finally crossed from words to dangerous action. The incident, rather than casting a pall over the upcoming wedding, seemed to have united the town in support of Bethany and Garrett. On their wedding day, exactly 6 months after Bethany had been left crying on the church steps, she walked down the aisle with steady steps and a heart full of certainty. Garrett waited for her at the altar, his smile brighter than the October sunshine streaming through the stained glass windows. When she reached him, he took her hands in his eyes conveying all the love and promise of their future together. "I told you you'd never cry alone again," he whispered as the minister began the ceremony. "And I never have," Bethany replied softly. "Not a single tear that you haven't been there to dry." Their vows were simple but heartfelt, a pledge to stand by each other through all the joys and sorrows life might bring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in cheers and applause, a far different scene from the last wedding attempt these walls had witnessed. At the reception, held in the town square under a canopy of autumn leaves, Garrett pulled Bethany aside for a moment of privacy. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small leather pouch and emptied its contents into Bethany's palm key. "What's this?" she asked, puzzled. "The key to our future," Garrett explained. "I finalized the purchase of our land yesterday. It's officially ours now." Bethany's eyes widened with delight. "Truly? Oh, Garrett. And there's more," he continued, his eyes dancing with excitement. "Mr. Miller offered me a generous wedding gift, lumber from his sawmill, and the help of his men to start building our house. We can break ground next week if you like." Tears of joy filled Bethany's eyes. "It's perfect." "Everything is perfect." "Well, not everything," Garrett amended, gently wiping away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "I did promise you'd never cry again, and here you are, crying on our wedding day." Bethany laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "These are happy tears, and they don't count." "Fair enough," Garrett conceded, drawing her close for a kiss that promised a lifetime of happiness ahead. 6 months later, they moved into their new home, a sturdy cabin built with the help of friends and neighbors on the spot Garrett had chosen all those months ago. It wasn't grand, just 2 rooms for now, with plans to expand as their family grew, but to Bethany, it was a palace. As they stood on their porch that first evening, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson, Garrett wrapped his arms around his wife, his hands resting gently on the slight swell of her belly where their first child was growing. "Are you happy, Mrs. Hayes?" he murmured against her hair. Bethany leaned back against him, savoring the strength and warmth of his embrace. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. "And to think it all began because you found me crying on those church steps." "Best day of my life," Garrett declared, turning her in his arms to face him. "The day I found the woman who would change everything." As their lips met in a tender kiss, Bethany knew with absolute certainty that while there might be challenges ahead, she would indeed never cry alone again. In Garrett Hayes, she had found not just a husband but a partner, protector, and true love, the kind of love stories were written about, the kind that lasted a lifetime. And in the golden light of that perfect sunset, with the promise of their future growing both within their hearts and within Bethany's body, they stepped forward together into the life they had built, one tear and one smile at a time.